think electric cars are a new invention, think again. They actually date back to Victorian times. Yes, there were battery-powered horseless carriages whining around the streets of London and Paris well before the turn of the last century. Electric cars even dominated land speed records until 1902.
But there's a good chance the first electric car you'll have actually heard of is the Nissan Leaf. Launched back in 2011, it made other battery-powered options of the time seem, well, like golf buggies really, because it looked like a proper car, and it quickly became the best-selling EV in the world.
Things have moved on though, so while the original Leaf still topped the electric car sales charts even at the end of its life, a real-world electric range of less than 100 miles is, compared to modern standards, quite frankly, a bit rubbish. But Nissan is looking to turn over a new Leaf with this new model, and it's hoping to improve the range, add some greater performance, and bring some new safety kit with it as well.
The new Leaf is certainly going to have its work cut out to win our group test though, because it'll have to beat the VW e-Golf, an extremely compelling proposition for the same reasons that the regular Golf is, and it was revised last year to give it a longer range between charges.
Don't forget about the Renault Zoe either. It's always been one of our favourite electric cars, and in this company, it looks a complete bargain, and it also promises a remarkable electric range. But before we get started on this test, don't forget that you can now buy cars through whatcar.com. So for the very best deals on any of these cars, or any other new car you might be interested in, click on the link on the top right of the screen. Some people still associate electric cars with milk float performance, but the truth couldn't be further from that. Modern electric cars actually feel really nippy, and the reason that they do is because they can produce all of their torque the instant you touch the accelerator. So that makes them great for dashing away from the traffic lights or onto a roundabout. That also means that even the Renault Zoe, which is the slowest of our trio, is no slouch. But which is the quickest? Let's do a quick drag race to find out. They're all quick off the mark, but the Zoe does quickly get left behind by its rivals when accelerating above 30 miles per hour. And it's really the least suited to outside lane motorway driving. The Leaf is the most powerful car here and easily the fastest, but while the e-Golf might not be quite as quick, it is the best car to drive in most other respects.
Why is that? Well, the e-Golf has the best steering and it smooths over bumps in the road with a sophistication its two rivals here can't even get close to. It isn't perfect though. The heavy battery pack and the quite high-walled energy-saving tyres means it can feel a little bit wallowy through corners compared with petrol or diesel versions of the Golf.
The Leaf is no hot hatch, but it does stay slightly more upright through the corners. The steering's a match for the e-Golfs as well. It's not quite as natural feeling, but it's meatier and more precise. Although you do feel more bumps at low speeds, the ride never feels that lumpy. And when you get to motorway speeds, it's very difficult to fault the ride comfort.
And the Zoe, well, it's outclassed here for both ride and handling. It trips up over the sort of bumps that wouldn't even register in the e-Golf, so you tend to find yourself doing a bit of a nodding dog impression along most urban roads. It's never truly uncomfortable though, and actually the steering gives you a reasonable sense of how much grip there is, even though there is quite a lot of body sway through corners.
In an electric car, when you lift off the accelerator, you can feel the car gradually begin to slow down. What's happening there is regenerative braking. That's when the car uses the brakes to harvest energy, which it can put back into the battery. The Leaf does this as well, but it takes it to the next level using something called the E-pedal. And if you switch it on, the regenerative braking becomes a lot harder, so much so that you can actually just use one pedal in town driving.
Now, when it comes to electric cars, performance isn't just about how quickly you can speed up and slow down, it's about how far you can get between charges. Now, we've previously measured the real-world ranges of all of these cars here at our testing facility in Bedfordshire, but before we talk about that, let's talk about the manufacturer claims. Nissan makes the boldest claim of 235 miles for the Leaf. Admittedly, that figure is based on an unrepresentative official European test cycle called the New European Drive Cycle, but it's still better than the 230 and 186 miles achieved respectively by the Zoe and the e-Golf in the same test. All three manufacturers are at least honest about the misleading nature of the official figures and quote real-world ranges accordingly. VW claims 125 miles, while Renault actually gives two ranges, 174 miles in the summer and 112 in the winter. Nissan claims 168 miles. Our test route includes a simulated mix of town, rural and motorway driving with 3 cars in convoy, and we swap drivers and running order after every circuit, about 8 miles, to keep everything as fair as possible. The temperature during the test was 3 to 5 degrees centigrade, which is far from ideal for battery performance, and all 3 cars were tested with their headlights on, the air conditioning to 21 degrees and normal driving mode selected.
So, last place in our real-world range test goes to the e-Golf, which managed just 93 miles on a full charge, A bit disappointing, to be honest. Second place goes to the Leaf, which managed a more respectable 108 miles.
But the clear winner and the car that will take you the furthest between charges is the Renault Zoe, which kept whirring along for 135 miles, enough to get you from London to Birmingham. And remember, that was in really quite cold conditions.
Let's take a closer look inside these cars now, and we'll start with the e-Golf, because this is the car that most drivers will find easiest to get comfortable in. That's because there's loads of adjustment in the seat, there's loads of adjustment in the steering wheel as well, and it's all very comfortable. The only slight annoyance is these side bolsters here don't hold you in place particularly well if you're going through especially tight and quick corners. The e-Golf has also got the plushest interior of the lot by a country mile. It comes with Volkswagen's range-topping Discover Navigation Pro system that brings this 9.2-inch touchscreen infotainment system. And that has graphics to rival an iPad. It responds promptly to touch inputs. The only shame is there aren't any physical buttons to use for the shortcut menus. We always prefer having physical buttons because they're easier to use on the move.
Now, the driving positions in the Leaf and the Zoe are rather more flawed. You might like the fact you sit a bit higher up in the Leaf, but you won't like the fact that the steering wheel only moves up and down, not in and out. So it probably means you'll have to sit too close to or too far away from the wheel than you'd ideally like. As for interior quality, well, it's a step up on the previous model, but it's still not exactly upmarket in here. The touchscreen is mostly simple to use thanks to its big icons and logical menus. The physical shortcut buttons that flank the display make it easier to hop between different functions, and we're grateful Nissan hasn't bowed to the latest trend and swapped the volume knob for a fiddly touch-sensitive pad. Less impressive is the resolution of the display, which is nowhere near as sharp as the e-Golf's and can be tricky to see in bright, sunny conditions.
The Zoe's steering wheel does adjust in and out, but it's angled up towards your face slightly, so it does feel a bit like you're driving a bus. The driver's seats are the least supportive of the lot as well, and it's the only one that doesn't get seat height adjustment. The infotainment system is essentially the same that's been knocking around in the Clio since about 2013, so it's far from the most sophisticated infotainment system on the market, and it misses out on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But apart from that, there's little else that really frustrates. The menus are simply laid out, and it's reasonably easy to use.
As for visibility, the relatively boxy e-Golf is the easiest to see out of in all directions. You won't have too many issues seeing out the front or side windows of the Leaf or Zoe, but over-the-shoulder visibility isn't ideal. All three cars come with rear sensors to help with parking though, while the Leaf goes one step further with both reversing and around view cameras. The latter displays a bird's eye view of the car on the central touchscreen, and it's really handy. Seeing where you're going at night is easiest in the e-Golf thanks to its powerful LED headlights. Our test Leaf had LEDs fitted too, which are a £350 option, and they were bright enough if not quite as far-reaching as the Golf's. Meanwhile, the Zoe's halogen headlights are frankly terrible. You'd almost be better off hanging a storm lantern on the bonnet. Now, this section seems a bit unfair on the Zoe because it's easily the smallest of our trio, being about the same size as a Polo, whereas the other two, well, they're about the same size as a Golf.
And unsurprisingly, the Zoe has the least amount of space up front. But tall drivers won't complain about head or legroom in any of our three contenders. It's the same story for rear space as well, where the Zoe offers the least amount of head and legroom. That's partially because the battery's stored under those rear seats. The Leaf offers good head and legroom, but the best of our trio is the e-Golf that offers the best head and legroom for tall passengers.
The Leaf is best for luggage. It managed to swallow 7 carry-on suitcases in our tests and has by far the longest load bay. The electric Golf has a smaller boot than conventionally powered versions because of the battery under the boot floor. It tied with the Zoe by taking 6 carry-on suitcases, although the e-Golf is the only one of our contenders with a height-adjustable boot floor, and as such has the flattest extended load area when the rear seats are folded down. However, while all three cars have folding rear seats, the seatbacks in the Zoe fold in one big cumbersome piece rather than in a 60-40 split. This means you can't carry 2 passengers in the back and, say, a couple of sets of golf clubs at the same time. There's also no body protection at the entrance of the Zoe's boot, so it can be easy to scuff it when you're loading things in and out.
Let's face it, however much you care about the environment, you probably won't be buying an electric car unless it saves you money. Well, there's good news if you're a company car driver, because all three qualify for the lowest benefit-in-kind tax band of 13%. But curiously, it'll rise to 16% in 2019, before plummeting to 2% in 2020. That's cohesive government thinking for you. So what does that mean if you aren't up on your accounting? Well, over the next 3 years, you'll sacrifice roughly the same amount of your salary as if you'd plumped for a middle-of-the-range petrol Volkswagen Polo, with about £500 separating the Zoe, our cheapest option, and the e-Golf, the most expensive company car. But you'll also be spending a lot less on fuel than you would in any petrol or diesel car. Even based on our cold weather range tests and an electricity price of 13 pence per kilowatt hour, these cars will only add between £400 and £500 to your electricity bill every 10,000 miles. Sign up to an Economy 7 tariff for cheaper charging at night and you'll pay around 8 pence or even less per kilowatt hour. However, if you're buying privately with cash or on PCP finance, you'll need to do a lot of miles before any of these cars actually start to save you cash. Even taking into account the £4,500 grant from the government you'll get when buying an electric vehicle and the fact you won't pay any road tax, a small petrol hatchback is still likely to be a much cheaper option in the long run. The exception is if you regularly drive into London's congestion charge zone, because then in an electric car you'll avoid the £11.50 daily fee.
Buy the Zoe and you'll get a free 7 kilowatt ChargeMaster charging point installed at your home, although the same thing only costs around £350 on the other two cars thanks to a grant from the government. Now all three cars come with one of these. It's called a Type 2 charging cable, but the Leaf and the Golf also have one of these. You'll probably recognise it, it's just a 3-pin domestic plug, and you can add one to the Zoe for around about £500. We'd recommend you do because although it takes ages to charge up the battery, it can be really handy if you get caught short.
While the three cars use the same Type 2 connector for normal charging, they have different connectors for fast charging. The Leaf's CHAdeMO connector is the most ubiquitous fast charger in the UK, while the e-Golf's CCS connector is the least common, although still not exactly rare.
The Leaf has the most standard luxuries. It's the only one with heated front seats and has the biggest wheels, for example. The Zoe is the least generously equipped with no front parking sensors and only manual cruise control. The others have adaptive cruise to automatically maintain a set distance from the car in front. However, the e-Golf is the only one without a standard heat pump for more efficient heating of the interior, partly explaining its disappointing range in cold weather.
Mind you, the Zoe's shortage of safety kit is more of a concern. You get just 4 airbags, the Leaf has 6 and the e-Golf 7, and there's not even the option to add automatic emergency braking. The other two get this important safety aid as standard, and the Leaf even adds traffic sign recognition and blind spot monitoring to its standard roster of safety aids.
Usually in our group tests, there are clear winners and clear losers, but this is a bit harder to call. That's because the best car here kind of depends on your viewpoint and your circumstance.
The e-Golf is definitely the best all-rounder. It's the nicest to drive, the smartest inside and the most practical. But on the other hand, the Zoe makes the most financial sense and will get you the furthest between charges, which are arguably the two most important things an electric car needs to do well.
But while the e-Golf is let down by its high price and limited range, and the Zoe by its poor driving position, safety provisions and cramped interior, it's actually the Leaf that emerges from this battle with the fewest scars. Yes, it's a shame that the steering wheel doesn't have more adjustment and the interior isn't the plushest around, but neither of these issues is a deal breaker. And so when you factor in its brilliant performance, low running costs and generous equipment, that makes the Nissan Leaf the best electric car that you can buy.
For the latest car news, reviews and videos, don't forget to subscribe to the What Car YouTube channel and check out the What Car new car buying site to find the very best deals on new cars.